My name is Lena Sterling, and at 35 years old, I never expected my own parents would try to steal from me. The historic manor my grandmother left me was my sanctuary, my weekend escape, and the only place that truly felt like a reflection of my soul. When I overheard my parents planning to sell it for my pregnant sister, Stella, something quiet and essential broke inside me. I made a decision that day that would redraw the map of our family forever. Let me tell you what happened. Growing up, my grandmother Clara was my anchor in a world where I often felt adrift. While my parents were captivated by the bright, chaotic energy of my younger sister, Stella, Grandma Clara showed me the beauty of quiet strength and unconditional love. Every summer, from the age of 8 until I left for university, I would spend 3 months at Blackwood Manor, her stone-built house nestled in the Amber Valley. There, I learned to identify birds by their songs, to tend to her sprawling rose gardens, and to sit in the deep silence of the library, enveloped by the scent of old paper and beeswax. During those sun-drenched, formative summers, she taught me the importance of self-possession and quiet dignity. "Lena, my dear," she would say, her hands, papery with age, gently covering mine, "never let anyone mistake your kindness for weakness. Your heart is a rare and beautiful thing. Guard it well, especially with those who believe they are entitled to it." At the time, I thought she was sharing the sort of gentle wisdom found in old books. I had no idea how precisely her words would one day echo in the chambers of my own life. Blackwood Manor itself was a place of understated magic. A 2-story stone house built in the late 1800s, it sat on 5 acres of rolling land, bordered by a whispering creek. It had deep-set windows that caught the afternoon light, slate floors that remained cool even on the hottest days, and a grand, curving staircase of dark, polished oak that creaked like a gentle sigh. The property included a walled garden, a small apple orchard with ancient, gnarled trees, and a detached carriage house that Grandma Clara had used as a studio for her botanical illustrations. When she passed away 5 years ago, at the age of 92, the world seemed to lose its color. The grief was a profound, silent ache. During the reading of her will, I was stunned to learn she had left Blackwood Manor exclusively to me, along with a letter explaining her choice. "My dearest Lena," the letter read, in her elegant, spidery script. "I am leaving this house to you because you are the only one who has ever truly listened to its stories. I have watched you connect with this land, with the very stones of its foundation, since you were a little girl. This house is a vessel of memories, and I know you will not only cherish them, but add your own beautiful chapters. This is not just property, my love. It is a piece of your own quiet, resilient soul." My parents, to my surprise, seemed supportive at first. They had a modern, comfortable home in the suburbs of Port Blossom, the city where I worked as a historical archivist, and had always referred to the manor as that drafty old place. My sister Stella, 28 and a whirlwind of artistic ambitions and fleeting passions, was too enamored with the thrum of city life to care about a house that didn't have a boutique coffee shop within a 1-block radius. Over the past 5 years, I poured my heart, my soul, and a significant portion of my archivist's salary into the manor. I didn't want to modernize it, but to preserve its spirit. I had the original sash windows painstakingly restored, the electrical systems carefully updated without disturbing the plasterwork, and the gardens brought back to their former glory using cuttings from Grandma Clara's favorite roses. Every weekend I could spare, I would make the 90-minute drive, leaving the city's noise behind and arriving on Friday evening to the deep, restorative quiet of the valley. I would return on Sunday night, my spirit recalibrated, ready to face another week. The contrast between Stella and me had only sharpened with age. While I had built a stable, quiet career preserving the past for the city's historical society, Stella fluttered between part-time jobs, art projects, and a string of intense, but short-lived relationships. Our parents perpetually framed her instability as a sign of her artistic temperament and free spirit. My practicality and dedication, meanwhile, were simply expected, like the rising of the sun. "Your sister is sensitive," my mother would say with a sigh, after Stella had another dramatic falling out with a gallery owner who just didn't get her vision. My own professional achievements were met with a brief, "That's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably circled back to Stella's latest crisis or triumph. Despite this imbalance, I maintained a peaceful, if somewhat distant, relationship with my family. Monthly Sunday dinners at my parents' house were a tradition, though I often felt like a quiet observer at my own family's gathering, a satellite orbiting the bright, chaotic star that was Stella. Everything shifted 3 months ago when Stella announced she was pregnant. Her boyfriend, Ben, a kind and steady software developer she'd been dating for just under a year, sat beside her, looking both thrilled and slightly terrified as my sister shared the news. My parents' initial shock quickly morphed into unrestrained joy about their first grandchild. "This changes everything," my mother declared, her hand clasped over Stella's. "You two need to start preparing. A baby needs stability." I offered my sincere congratulations, though a quiet worry took root in my mind. Stella's life was anything but stable. My concerns proved to be well-founded. Over the following weeks, the topic of the couple's living situation became a constant refrain. "They can't possibly raise a baby in that tiny one-bedroom apartment," my mother fretted during one Sunday dinner. "The housing market is just impossible for young people starting out," my father added, his gaze sweeping meaningfully in my direction. I sensed they were building a case for financial assistance, which wouldn't have been the first time. I had loaned Stella money for art supplies, rent deposits, and car repairs over the years, none of which was ever repaid or, for that matter, mentioned again. Given my stable income, I had already resigned myself to contributing to a fund for my future niece or nephew. What I never anticipated was the sheer scale of their expectations. It was during another Sunday dinner, about 2 months after the pregnancy announcement, that I accidentally discovered the full extent of their plan. I had excused myself to use the restroom and was walking back down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the thick runner. I heard my father's voice, low and conspiratorial, drifting from the kitchen. "I think we should list the manor next month. Spring is the best time to sell, and we could get a premium for a property like that in this market." I froze, my hand hovering in the air. He must be talking about one of his own small investment properties, I thought. He'd dabbled in real estate for years, always ignoring my quiet suggestions to consult a professional. "Do you think Lena will put up a fight?" my mother responded, her voice a hushed whisper that still carried clearly down the hall. The mention of my name sent a glacial chill through my veins. They couldn't be. They couldn't possibly be talking about my house. The house that was legally and spiritually mine, left to me in a will they had both witnessed, a place I had nurtured with my own hands and savings for 5 years. "She has to be reasonable," my father continued, his tone laced with a confidence that infuriated me. "Stella is starting a family. She needs a proper home, not some cramped city apartment. Besides, Lena doesn't even live there full-time. It's a luxury, just sitting empty most of the week." My hands began to tremble. The casual audacity of it, the way they spoke of my sanctuary as a communal asset to be liquidated for my sister's benefit, was staggering. They were planning to sell my home, my inheritance, without even the courtesy of a conversation. "We should bring it up after dessert," my mother suggested. "We'll be gentle. We'll emphasize how important this is for the baby. Lena has always been the sensible one." By sensible, I knew she meant compliant. The good daughter who never made waves. The reliable one who could always be counted on to sacrifice for her sister, a role I had been cast in since childhood. I must have made a small, involuntary sound, because the kitchen fell silent. I took a deep, steadying breath, smoothed my dress, and walked into the kitchen with what I hoped was a placid expression. "Need any help with the cake, Mom?" I asked, my voice surprisingly even despite the tempest raging inside me. "No, dear, everything's ready. Go on and sit down. We'll be right in." I returned to the dining room, where Stella was showing Ben photos of designer nurseries on her phone, both of them laughing. She looked up at me, her smile bright and, to my newly sensitized eyes, tinged with calculation. "Everything okay, Lena? You look a little pale." "Just a long week at work," I murmured, taking my seat. When my parents returned with coffee and a lemon tart, I steeled myself. Part of me was still desperately hoping I had misunderstood, that there was a rational explanation. My father cleared his throat after serving the tart, the classic paternal signal for a serious discussion. "Lena, we wanted to talk to you about something important. It's about your grandmother's house." "My house," I corrected him, my voice quiet but firm. He blinked, momentarily thrown. "Yes, well, technically. But we've been thinking about Stella's situation." My mother jumped in, her voice adopting the syrupy, persuasive tone she used when she wanted something. "Darling, your sister is going to have a baby. They need space, a safe and proper home to raise a child." "And?" I prompted, a coldness spreading through my chest. "And we think the most sensible solution would be to sell the manor," my father stated, laying it out as if it were an obvious and foregone conclusion. "The proceeds would be more than enough for a substantial down payment on a lovely family home for Stella and Ben, something with a garden in a good school district." I stared at them, a chasm of disbelief opening before me. I waited for a flicker of doubt, an acknowledgement of the monumental presumption of their request. There was none. "The house belongs to me," I said slowly, articulating each word with precision. "Grandma Clara left it to me. In her will. I pay the taxes, the insurance, the upkeep. I have invested a significant amount of my own money into its restoration. And you've done a lovely job with it, dear, no one is denying that," my mother rushed to say. "But you have to be practical, Lena. You only use it on weekends. Your sister needs a home 7 days a week. Then you can help her buy one," I replied, my voice hardening. "Why does my house have to be the one that's sold?" "Because we don't have that kind of money just lying around," my father snapped, his veneer of gentle reason cracking. "This is about family helping family. It's what people do." "Your sister is pregnant," my mother added, her voice rising with emotion, as if this one fact negated all others. "Don't you care about your niece or nephew having a safe place to grow up?" I turned to look at Stella, who had been uncharacteristically silent, observing the exchange. She met my gaze not with embarrassment, but with an expression of defiant entitlement. "I've already been looking at paint colors for the nursery," she said, her voice breezy. "The upstairs bedroom, the one with the view of the creek, gets the most beautiful morning light. It would be perfect." The casual way she spoke of my private space, the room where I kept my grandmother's journals and my own collection of rare books, was like a match to dry tinder. They hadn't just considered this. They had planned it, dreamed it, decorated it in their minds, all without a single thought for me. "Let me be perfectly clear," I said, setting my coffee cup down with deliberate care to hide the tremor in my hands. "You want me to give up the house my grandmother specifically entrusted to me, the house I have lovingly cared for, so you can sell it and give the money to Stella?" "Not give up, Lena," my father corrected. "You'd get a portion of the proceeds too, of course, after Stella's down payment is secured." "How generous," I replied, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. "And did any of you think to ask me before you started making these plans? Or did you just assume I would roll over as usual?" "Lena, don't be so dramatic," my mother sighed, her expression hardening. "This is what families do. They make sacrifices for one another." "Sacrifice is a two-way street, Mom," I said, the words feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. "When has anyone in this family ever sacrificed anything for what I want, for what matters to me?" A thick, uncomfortable silence descended on the table. This was not how the Sterlings operated. Conflict was to be avoided, smoothed over, especially when it stood in the way of Stella getting what she wanted. Ben, looking deeply mortified, finally spoke up. Maybe we should talk about this another time, when everyone's a bit calmer." "There is nothing to discuss," I said, standing up from the table. My legs felt surprisingly steady. "The house is mine. I will not be selling it. Not for Stella, not for anyone. The discussion is over." "Lena, sit down," my mother gasped, her face a mask of shocked indignation. "We are not finished." "I am," I replied, picking up my purse. "Thank you for dinner." As I walked towards the front door, my father's voice followed me, laced with disbelief and warning. You think about this, Lena. You think long and hard. Family has to come first. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, turning back to look at them. That's exactly what I'm doing, I said, before letting myself out into the cool night air. The solid click of the door behind me felt like a punctuation mark at the end of a long, painful chapter. As I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, a profound and sorrowful realization washed over me. They had fully expected me to capitulate. After some token resistance, they believed the good, sensible daughter would do her duty. Not this time. This time, my grandmother's words echoed louder than their demands. The following weekend, I drove out to Blackwood Manor with a heaviness in my heart that felt alien in this place of peace. For 5 years, the sight of the old stone house at the end of the long, tree-lined drive had been a balm to my soul. Now, as I unlocked the heavy oak door and stepped inside, the chill of my family's betrayal seemed to have seeped into the very walls. I walked through each room, my hand trailing along the cool stone of the fireplace, the smooth wood of the bookshelves my grandfather had built. I stood in the kitchen, with its deep porcelain sink and the faint, lingering scent of lavender and dried herbs. I went upstairs to the bedroom Stella had so casually claimed, the one overlooking the creek, and looked out at the water glittering in the afternoon sun. This was more than a house. It was a repository of my happiest memories, a tangible link to the one person who had seen and loved me for exactly who I was. Sitting in Grandma Clara's worn armchair on the covered stone terrace, I tried to imagine strangers living here, their furniture in these rooms, their lives unfolding within these walls. The thought was a physical blow. This house wasn't an asset to be liquidated. It was a legacy. My phone had been a constant source of anxiety since the dinner. I had been deflecting, sending brief, non-committal texts saying I needed time to think. Now, as I watched the sun dip below the rolling hills of the valley, painting the sky in strokes of rose and gold, my mother called again. "Lena," she began, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "I really wish you'd stop this childish sulking. Your father and I are trying to have a serious conversation with you." "We had a conversation, Mom," I replied, my voice even. "I gave you my answer. I'm not selling the house." "Your sister is beside herself," she countered, playing the card that had always been her trump. Stella's tears had been the ultimate weapon in our family dynamic for as long as I could remember. "I'm sorry she's upset," I said, a surprising lack of my usual guilt rising within me. "But her feelings don't change the legal ownership of the property. Your father has already spoken to a realtor, a friend of his. He says the market is incredibly strong. We could have it listed by next week." The casual way she announced this, as if my consent were a mere formality, sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. "Without my signature on a listing agreement, you can't do anything, Mom. I am the sole owner. It's a matter of law." "Oh, don't be so technical and difficult, Lena," she huffed in exasperation. "This is a family matter, not a legal one." "It became a legal matter the moment you decided to dispose of my property without my consent," I retorted. The conversation ended with a frustrated sigh from her and a sharp click as she hung up. That was only the beginning. The pressure campaign intensified over the weekend. My father texted me links to real estate listings for family homes he thought were suitable for Stella, with notes like, "This is what the sale of the manor could provide." Stella sent me photos of cribs and changing tables with captions like, "Can't you just picture this in the upstairs room?" Each message felt like a small, sharp jab, a deliberate attempt to wear down my resolve. By Sunday evening, as I packed my overnight bag to return to the city, I received the most audacious message of all. A text from my father: "We've arranged for an open house next Saturday afternoon. Please make sure the place is tidy." I called him immediately, my voice shaking with rage. "You did what?" "Now, Lena, calm down," he began, his voice taking on that infuriatingly placating tone. "We just thought it would be a good idea to get the ball rolling, to gauge interest." "Cancel it," I said, my voice dangerously low. "You have no authority to show my house to anyone. We still have the spare key from when we helped you move in that big bookshelf last year," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "So you don't even need to be there." We can handle everything. The cold realization that they not only had a key but were fully prepared to use it to enter my home and show it to strangers was the final, irrevocable line crossed. This had moved beyond entitlement and emotional blackmail into something that felt like a violation. I ended the call and immediately phoned my friend Maya, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who had been my confidant through years of family drama. "They did what?" she exclaimed after I recounted the latest development. "Lena, that is so far beyond not okay. That's breaking and entering. They cannot hold an open house for a property they don't own." "I know that, and you know that," I sighed, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "But they seem to be operating in a reality where family connection supersedes property law. So, what are you going to do?" I stared out the window at the darkening landscape, the first stars beginning to prick the deep indigo sky. An idea, bold and terrifying, began to form in my mind. It felt extreme, even vengeful, but the more I considered it, the more it seemed like the only way to take back control, to make a statement so clear it could not be misinterpreted. They wanted to sell my house? Fine. But it would be on my terms, and they were about to receive a master class in the consequences of their assumptions. "I don't know yet," I lied, a strange calm settling over me. "But I'm not going to let them do this." "Good," Maya said firmly. "It's about damn time, Lena. They've been walking all over your kind heart for years." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of the house for a long time. I could change the locks, but that felt like a temporary, defensive measure. I could have Maya send a cease and desist letter, but the thought of legal threats against my own parents made me feel ill. My idea, however, was proactive. It was definitive. By the time I arrived back at my city apartment, the plan was fully formed. My parents wanted the house sold. So be it. But the outcome would be nothing like the one they had so arrogantly envisioned. Monday morning, I bypassed my own office and went to see a man named Alistair Finch. He was a retired history professor and a prominent board member at the Historical Society where I worked. A few months prior, during a fundraiser, he had mentioned to me his search for a quiet country retreat, a place with history and character, after the passing of his wife. I had thought of Blackwood Manor then, a fleeting, wistful thought of what a perfect custodian he would be. Now, that thought returned with purpose. I found him in his study, a room that smelled comfortingly of books and pipe tobacco. I explained the situation, not in all its messy, emotional detail, but the essential facts. That I was being pressured to sell a beloved family home, and that I would rather see it go to someone who would cherish it than have it sold out from under me for purely financial reasons. "I remember you speaking of your grandmother's house with such love, Lena," he said, his eyes kind and intelligent. "It would be a difficult thing to part with." "It is," I admitted. "Which is why I've come to you first, Mr. Finch. Before I consider putting it on the open market. I know you would be a guardian of its history, not just an owner." He was intrigued. We arranged for him to see the property the following Saturday, the very day my parents had planned their illegal open house. The symmetry was not lost on me. For the next few days, I was a ghost in my own life, communicating with my family in brief, evasive texts. I told them I was considering all my options and that I would be at the manor on Saturday for some private appointments, effectively blocking their plans. When Saturday arrived, I met Alistair at the gate. As I walked him through the house, I didn't give a sales pitch. I told him stories. This is the hearth where my grandmother taught me to read. This is the window where I watched a family of deer every morning one summer. In the walled garden, I showed him the climbing rose that was a cutting from a bush planted in 1920. He didn't speak much, but he listened with a deep, attentive respect. When we stood in the carriage house studio, with its beautiful north-facing windows, he was quiet for a long time. "My wife was a painter," he said softly. "She would have loved this light." Before he left, he turned to me on the stone terrace. "Lena, I will not insult you by haggling over a place that is clearly a piece of your heart. I will have my solicitor draw up a formal offer for the current market value. A fair price for a priceless home. And my only condition would be that you take your time moving your personal treasures. A house like this should not be emptied in a hurry. His offer, when it came on Monday, was clean, generous, and came with a closing date that was startlingly soon. I accepted without hesitation. The next 2 weeks were a blur of quiet activity. I hired a small, discreet moving company to transport the most important items: me grandmother's journals, her botanical illustrations, the hand-carved rocking chair, and boxes of books and photographs to a climate-controlled storage unit in the city. Each item I packed was a pang of grief, but also a reclamation. These were my memories, my legacy, and I was securing them. My solicitor, a colleague of Maya's, handled the paperwork with brisk efficiency. The title was clean, my ownership absolute. My parents had no legal standing whatsoever. The closing took place on a Thursday morning at my solicitor's quiet, wood-paneled office. As I signed the final document, transferring the deed of Blackwood Manor to Alastair Finch, I felt a profound and complex mix of sorrow and liberation. It was done. The funds were transferred to a new bank account at an institution my family had no connection with. The house was no longer mine. Now, all I had to do was wait. I didn't have to wait long. For 2 weeks after the sale, an eerie silence fell. I deflected my mother's calls, pleading a heavy workload. I knew the quiet couldn't last. The storm broke on a Saturday morning. I was in my city apartment, attempting to read, when my phone buzzed with a call from my father. His voice was tight with panic. "Lena, thank God you answered. There's a man in your house." The moment had arrived, sooner and more dramatically than I had imagined. "What are you talking about, Dad?" I asked, my voice a carefully constructed mask of calm. "We drove out. Stella wanted to take some measurements for nursery furniture and we used our key, and there's a man here. He says we're trespassing. He's called the police, Lena." The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. They had driven to my former home, with my pregnant sister in tow, and let themselves in as if they owned the place. They had walked into Alastair Finch's private sanctuary. "Stay right where you are," I said, the words falling like ice chips. "I'm on my way." "Hurry," he pleaded. "This man is threatening to have us arrested." The drive to the Amber Valley was a surreal hour of quiet resolve. As I turned onto the long gravel drive of Blackwood Manor, I saw the scene: a local police car parked behind my father's sedan, my mother on the terrace steps looking pale and distraught, my father gesticulating wildly at a patient-looking police officer, and Stella crying theatrically in the passenger seat of their car. Standing calmly by the officer was Alastair Finch, looking more disappointed than angry. As I stepped out of my car, all heads turned toward me. "Lena," my father cried, relief flooding his face. "Tell this officer that this is all a misunderstanding. Tell him this is your house, and we have your permission to be here." I walked slowly toward the small group, the gravel crunching under my feet. The air was thick with tension and unspoken history. This was the moment of truth. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the quiet country air, "there is no misunderstanding. This is not my house anymore." I turned and nodded politely to Alastair. "I sold it 2 weeks ago to Mr. Finch. He is the legal owner now." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by a bird chirping in the old apple tree. Even Stella's sobs from the car ceased abruptly. My father's face cycled through a series of emotions: relief, confusion, disbelief, and finally, a dawning, horrified comprehension. "What are you talking about?" my mother whispered, rising unsteadily from the steps. "You couldn't have sold it. We had plans for it. For Stella." The officer, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, glanced between us. "Ma'am," he said to my mother, "are you saying you entered this private property without the owner's permission?" "No. It's a family matter," my father interjected, trying to regain control. "Lena, this isn't funny. Tell them it's a joke." I looked directly at my father, my gaze unwavering. "There is no joke. The house is sold. The sale was legally closed and recorded with the county. You are trespassing on Mr. Finch's property." "That's impossible," my mother cried, her voice cracking. "You can't sell the house without telling us." "Your plans were not my plans," I said, the quiet strength in my voice surprising even me. You decided to sell my house without my consent. You planned an open house without my knowledge. You used a key you should have returned years ago. And today, you broke into a home that does not belong to you. My father's face was a mottled, dangerous red. You had no right. I had every right, I countered. It was my house. Legally. Morally. And in every other way that matters. The officer cleared his throat, clearly wanting to de-escalate the situation. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's been a serious miscommunication. Mr. Finch, do you wish to press charges? Alistair, to his immense credit, shook his head. No, officer. That won't be necessary. As long as they leave the premises now and understand that they are not to return without my express invitation. My father looked as if he might implode, but my mother, finally grasping the reality and the humiliation of the situation, pulled on his arm. Robert, let's just go. Not here. Not like this. As they turned toward their car, Stella finally burst out, her face streaked with mascara and twisted in a mask of fury. She stormed towards me, her hands clenched into fists. How could you do this to me? She shrieked. To my baby? We needed this house. You knew we needed it. You needed a home, Stella, I replied, my voice still level. You are not entitled to mine. You're a selfish, jealous monster, she sobbed. You've always been jealous of me, and now you've ruined everything for my child. My father had to physically steer her back to the car as she continued to rain down accusations. As they drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust, the officer gave a slight shake of his head. I'll file a report of the incident, sir, but with no charges pressed, that'll be the end of it. Might I suggest you rekey the locks? Already done, officer, Alistair said calmly. Thank you for your assistance. When the police car had departed, Alistair and I stood in the now quiet driveway. I am so profoundly sorry about that, I said, the adrenaline beginning to recede, leaving a hollow ache. I should have warned you that something like this was a possibility. He gave me a small, sad smile. Family, my dear Lena, is rarely a simple affair. Would you care for a cup of tea? I believe the porch is still yours to visit any time you wish. I looked at the beautiful stone house, its windows reflecting the blue sky, now a home to someone else's life. Thank you, Alistair, but I think I should go. The fallout from this is probably just beginning. The offer is a standing one, he said kindly. As I drove back to Port Blossom, my phone began to light up with a furious barrage of calls and texts. I silenced it and placed it in the passenger seat. The confrontation had been as dreadful as I had feared. And yet, beneath the pain and the turmoil, I felt a deep, anchoring sense of peace. The truth was out. The boundary had been drawn, not in sand, but in stone. The weeks that followed were a cold war of silence and recrimination. My parents sent a letter drafted by their lawyer, the same realtor friend, demanding I turn over the proceeds from the sale, claiming a verbal family agreement existed, a ludicrous assertion that Maya dismissed with a laugh. My mother left tearful voicemails accusing me of destroying the family. Stella, meanwhile, orchestrated a social media campaign, posting vague but pointed messages about betrayal and selfishness that had mutual friends calling me with concerned questions. The narrative they spun was simple and effective. Lena, the cold, unfeeling career woman, had cruelly deprived her pregnant sister of a home out of pure spite. My side of the story, the legal ownership, the years of maintenance, the utter violation of their assumptions, was an inconvenient detail they omitted. There were dark, lonely nights when I questioned myself. Had I been too harsh? Was there a compromise I had missed? The guilt was a heavy cloak. But then I would remember the tone of my father's voice in the kitchen, so certain of my compliance. I would remember my sister, already decorating my room in her mind. And I would remember my grandmother's words, "Never let anyone mistake your kindness for weakness." About a month after the incident, I received a quiet text from Ben, Stella's boyfriend. "Can we talk? Coffee?" My treat. We met at a neutral cafe downtown. He looked exhausted. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Stella doesn't know I'm here." "She'd be furious." He then proceeded to tell me that he had never wanted or expected my house. He had a good job, they could afford their apartment, and he had been steadily saving for a down payment on a condo himself. I wanted to surprise her, he said, shaking his head. I was so uncomfortable with how your parents were handling it, how they talked about you. It felt wrong. This was never about need, Lena. It was about them wanting to give her a grand gift, but on your dime. His words were a balm, a validation that cut through the fog of guilt. It wasn't about a baby needing a home. It was about entitlement. 6 months passed. I bought a small, light-filled condo in the city with a balcony that I filled with potted rose bushes. Alistair would occasionally send me photos of Blackwood Manor, the first snow on the roof, the spring daffodils blooming along the creek. Each photo was a gentle pang, but also a comfort. Then, Ben texted me a photo, a tiny, wrinkled, beautiful baby girl wrapped in a hospital blanket. Lily Clara Sterling. 7 pounds 2 ounces. Thought you'd want to know you're an aunt. Looking at that innocent face, a new path forward became clear. I took a significant portion of the money from the sale and established a trust fund for Lily, designated strictly for her future education. I sent the documentation to Ben and Stella, along with a simple card and a hand-knitted blanket I'd bought, similar to one Clara had made for me. 2 weeks later, my mother called. Her voice was subdued. Tyler told us what you did for Lily, she said. There was a long pause. It was a very generous thing to do. She's my niece, I said simply. I want her to have a good start. Another pause, this one longer, heavier. Your father and we've been talking. Perhaps we didn't handle the situation with the manor very well. We were so focused on the new baby, it wasn't an apology, not quite, but it was the closest she had ever come. We miss you, Lena. Maybe you could come for dinner on Sunday? To meet Lily? The first dinner back was fragile, paved with unspoken words. My father was stiffly polite. Stella was distant, but I saw her watching me as I held Lily, my touch gentle and sure. Later, as I was leaving, Stella followed me to the door, Lily asleep on her shoulder. I was so angry with you, she said softly. I really felt like you chose a house over my baby. It was never about choosing a house over a baby, I said, my voice equally soft. It was about choosing myself. My right to my own life, my own property. It was about not letting my story be rewritten by someone else. She looked down at her sleeping daughter, her expression thoughtful. Motherhood it's making me see things differently. About boundaries. About respect. I want Lily to know she gets to write her own story. She looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw my sister, not the golden child, but a woman, a mother. I'm sorry, Lena. Not for wanting a home, but for thinking I had a right to yours. The apology, so direct and unexpected, healed a wound I hadn't realized was still so open. In the end, I didn't lose a house, I gained myself. The process was painful, the lessons hard won, but Blackwood Manor, in its leaving, gave me the greatest gift of all, the quiet, unshakable knowledge that true family love is not about sacrifice, but about respect. It's about honoring the boundaries that allow each person to flourish and having the courage to defend them, especially when it's the hardest thing to do. Have you ever found yourself in a position where you had to draw a difficult line with the people you love? I'd be interested to hear how you navigated it and what you learned about yourself and about family in the process. Sometimes, our most challenging moments are the ones that shape us into who we were always meant to become.